we are looking at our decimal assessment that we took.
Okay, and what were some things that you noticed?
All right. Well, when we pulled up all the questions, we did this assessment digitally. So already that's one thing that was a little different, I think, that the kids experienced, was just having to enter in numbers, look at things in a digital way. I could tell that that was a struggle for a couple of them, because a couple of them asked lots of questions about how to enter in the numbers and spacing and stuff. So that was something that I noticed as we were taking it. But how they performed, overall, I think the two areas where they scored, the questions that they scored the lowest on, majority of them did, was one about forms of numbers. I think both of them were.
Okay.
So that would be like, what was that? Like them being able to take the number, take the decimal, and write it in different forms. So expanded notation, expanded form is where they scored. And
Are any of those new teaks for them this year?
Decimals in general are new,
Okay,
are
so-
new for
okay,
them. Just decimals, just the place value, the function, the decimal overall is new to them.
Okay. So I'm noticing that it looks like the forms of decimals, they work pretty low. I mean, the average is like 35% on a couple of those questions. It looks like that one was, they had to write it in expanded notation or type it, I guess you said digital assessment. What do you think could be wrong, or what do you think could have gone wrong maybe with that question? Or
I think they didn't really practice actually like typing out the number with parentheses, with spacing, like even on the keyboard, finding the multiplication symbol, which they would have used like an X. So just things like that. Like it threw them off typing it.
okay.
Versus how we practice in the classroom, they did a lot of identifying, like matching, or like, is this the right way or is this not the right way? So they didn't have a lot of practice coming up with it on their own.
So you're saying that just the format of how they answered those like expanded notation questions was very different than how maybe you practiced
A little
in
bit.
class.
A little bit.
Okay, I can see where that could be kind of a hang up.
It would be interesting to ask it to them in a different way, not digitally, and see if they still didn't understand that. That would be interesting to see.
Okay. What do you want them to be able to do with this skill? Specifically, like the expanded notation questions.
Right.
Like, what would you want to see them do with that skill?
I would like for them to be able to have the number sense of a decimal, know what place value each number is in, what the value is, and then being able to break it apart in those different forms, whether it's expanded form or expanded notation. Expanded notation is also a little bit of not newer, but it's one that they aren't as familiar with.
Okay.
They even kind of struggled with notation with just whole numbers.
Okay.
So I think that's something that they're just, when you ask that just general question, like what's the value of that number, they kind of want to tell you the place it's in, not how much it's worth. So they still struggle with that. So
And
they struggle with value, and they were throwing decimals at it. So
Right. Double
it can be double whammy. Right.
You mentioned that the way that you taught it in the lesson was different than how they were assessed on it. So kind of explain like what that lesson was. Like how do we go through that lesson?
They were shown a video that kind of modeled about different forms of numbers. I did model it with them as well, with the video. As the video was going, we kind of stopped and talked about it.
Okay.
And then they did an independent practice with using a boom deck, but it would show it's like little flashcards, and it would show them, an expanded form, and was that in a decimal, and they kind of matched it up that way. So it was an independent, just kind of matching, identifying activity.
Is there any part of that you think maybe they were still a little bit confused with before they took the assessment, or?
I do feel like we did a lot of just that kind of practice, but I didn't give like a exit ticket.
Okay.
I didn't give like a formal kind of yes or no, do you get it or not get it. They just kind of practiced with it, and then we kind of slowly moved towards the assessment. So,
how many days did you spend on like the expanded notation part?
just one day.
Okay.
One day. which probably, obviously with the scores, that could have been something we spend more time on,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. Now I found, or I guess let me ask you this first. How might you reteach it? So if we need to reteach this to the kids maybe that didn't quite grasp the expanded notation, you said
Right.
maybe more days would help. How would we reteach it maybe for better understanding?
I think they get hung up on like the words that are being used, like
Okay.
place and value.
Yeah.
And when you're separating, like if the digit 3 is in the 10th place, and then, what does that 3 even mean? And then when you're multiplying it by what place it's in, they just kind of, you're getting maybe hung up on the words.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they just kind of need like a kind of a system of how would we break this number apart. And we're kind of doing the same system each time. I don't know. That might make more sense
Okay.
to them.
I found this teacher. Now I've come and go in different classrooms just to see how they're teaching the forms of numbers, and I found this lesson that I want to show you.
Okay.
And I thought it was interesting because I've never seen it taught this way before, but it might help. So let's just look and see if we can notice maybe any differences in wording that maybe could get more kids to maybe that aha moment. Okay, so
Guys,
let's watch.
welcome to our homework corner. In this video, I'm going to go over expanded form and expanded notation. So those are two different things, but they're both talking about the value of a number. So I have a number up here, and we have expanded our number into the 10,000s place value. So we've made it, instead of going just to the thousands, we're now going 5 place values into the 10,000s place value. But we've talked about place value, we've talked about the patterns of place value, how we have the ones and the tens and the hundreds in our ones unit, or in our ones place value period, and we've got the one, basically the same thing, the ones, tens, and hundreds of the thousands period, where our ones and our tens are best friends, we say them together, just like our thousands and our 10,000s are best friends, we say them together. And then we have our hundreds place, who he gets his first and last name, which is whatever his number is, and hundreds. So for example, 500. And we'll see how that pattern will continue once we add to another place.
That's interesting how to
in our
combine
number.
them.
But for right now,
Yeah.
we're at the 10,000s place value. Now, we've talked about expanded form already. Expanded form is where I take that number and I put it into its value. I stretch it out and I say, what are each of these numbers worth? So one thing that we can do that is very, very helpful is to take our number and put it in a place value box. So we want to take our number and we want to say, where is each number located? So we've got the ones, we've got the tens, we've got the hundreds, I'm just gonna write their abbreviation, we've got the thousands, and now we have 10,000s. So we have all of our place values on our place value number in our box, and we know that each number in that box has a value of its own. This number's not worth just 3. This number's in the 10,000s place, so it's worth 30,000 because it's worth 3 groups of 10,000, and that's that expanded notation. So we're going to look at both of those right now. So if we just look at their values, what are they worth? Well, the 3 is 30,000 plus the 2, which its value is in the thousands place, so that's 2,000 plus the 5 is in the hundreds place, so that's 500 plus our 8 is in our tens place, so we're saying 8 tens, which is 80, and then 6 is in the ones place, so that's 6 ones. So this is what we first started with. This is expanded form, just taking our number and stretching it into its value, saying what is that 3 worth, what is that 2 worth, what is that 5 worth. Now we've added on to that, so this is expanded form. Expanded form. Oops. Now we've added from expanded form into expanded notation. And expanded notation is the same thing as this, except for we're saying, how did we make that 3, or how did we make that 30,000? How did we make that 2,000? So it looks like it's tricky, but it's really not. as long as you know your place values, if you use this box, it won't be tricky at all. So expanded notation is where I'm going to take it and I'm going to show you how I made that value of 30,000. Well, if I look at my box, I see I have a 3 in the 10,000s place. So I have 3 groups of 10,000.
Using multiplication.
And we know that 3 groups of 10,000 makes that 30,000 plus, now I have to look at what's in that thousands place. Well, I have 2 groups of 1,000 plus 5 groups of 100 plus, and I'm going to come down here because it gets kind of long, plus 8 groups of 10, and then I can see I have 6 in the ones place, so 6 groups of 1. So expanded notation is really nothing different except for the only thing is that we're saying instead of just what is its value, we're saying how do we make that value. So if this is 30,000, then how did I make that 30,000? Well, I had 3 groups of 10,000.
Okay, so what did you think?
I liked it. I liked the wording of when she broke apart the number for expanded notation using the groups of. Because, and even though I feel like I did that as well, but I think just, going back over, how do we make that number? And I think when they were, this is a whole number, when we went to the decimals, it was almost like maybe we rushed it because we kind of assumed, at least I did, assume that they did we already did the whole numbers. That was easy. We got that. And then we went to decimal. Okay, what's the same thing? And I think maybe it just got rushed. Spending that one day,
Yeah.
I think going back over it just as slowly as we would have done it with expanded notation, and just using that word, because it's bringing it back to multiplication. How did we get that 30,000? It's 3 groups of 10,000.
And I think even that word, like groups of, is
Right.
something that they're familiar with hearing from 3rd grade.
Right.
As they're starting to learn multiplication.
Right. That was good.
Okay, what do you think the impact could be if you use this strategy, like with the learners when we reteach it?
I think also just reflecting back and like when they were doing expanded notation, especially with decimals and even whole numbers, they need to know that it is like the same pattern every time. You're going to have that number times its place value. Number times its place value. It's just like the same pattern.
Very repetitive.
So I hope that they would pick up that it is the same pattern even going into decimals. It's not going to change. I hope that they would have a better understanding of the value of the number, because I think that's something that still kind of gets confusing. Place versus value.
Absolutely. Well, and they have to have that
Just
good
that number
understanding of,
sense.
yes, that number sense and the value to be able to do this.
Right.
So what do you want your teaching objective to be, like in your new lesson, your reteaching lesson?
I think the focus is definitely going to be expanded form and expanded notation with decimals. Can they verbalize it? Can they explain to me what they're doing? Can they identify it? Sorry. And can they be able to write it independently? I think we practiced the matching. They did fine with that, but I think on the assessment they were having to do it. They were having to form that number themselves. So I think I want them to have more practice on forming the number out themselves and
So
be
like-
able to talk their way through it.
Okay.
Can they go back and read the number, and if they put it back together, would it work?
Would it make sense?
Would it make sense? Right.
Okay. Looking at our high priority learning standards, I'm looking and I feel like it would be, I can represent the value of the digit and decimals.
Right.
Using the expanded notation.
Yes, that would be our objective.
And
focus
you were
on.
saying, what will learners need to do to master the objective? You want them to be
explain
able to explain.
what they're doing.
Okay.
I want them to be able to verbalize it. I guess that's the same thing.
So
as
explain it
explaining.
verbally.
Being able to do it both ways, expanded form and expanded notation.
Okay. And are you meaning both ways, like taking it from a standard form and putting it into
Yes.
the others?
And then vice versa. Right.
Okay.
Because it's almost like they're on two sides. They need to go back and forth. Yes.
Okay. So, because this is kind of a new strategy, I think maybe we should script out maybe how we might
Okay.
teach it. So what were maybe some keywords or vocabulary that maybe we want to make sure that we use?
The groups of.
The groups of definitely.
Groups of.
I liked how she did the expanded form first.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
So you can make the connection to how do we make this 30,000?
Mm-hmm.
I really like that.
Mhm. I wonder, I always feel like I've always started with expanded form and then went to expanded notation. It would be, I don't know, I think that's the right way to do it. I think it's best to start with expanded form. I feel like that makes sense. It would be, I think that's the natural way of like, what is this number actually, and then how do we get that number?
Yeah, I feel like it's a good connection.
Even though they're kind of I was thinking they're kind of multiplying backwards. Like they have their answer, 30,000. Well, how do you get 30,000? You know, I don't know if they should, if starting, I don't know. But I think
it's a good way to connect it.
Yeah.
To connect it back.
so. Starting with expanded form, then going into the expanded notation.
And then you're saying you want to use the groups of when you're doing the
When we're
expanded
doing
notation.
the expanded notation.
Did you notice in the video how when she first had the number, she did teach them
She
how
put
to
it
draw the chart
in the place value chart. Yep.
around the numbers? Do you think that would be helpful?
Yes.
I think especially for some of those struggling learners that struggle with the values anyway, and just being able to name like what that place is.
Well, yeah. And I
Teaching
think
them how to just set that up.
right. And I think if we're going into decimals, it's like because that's where sometimes I think if they pull that if the 3 was in the 10th place and they're pulling that number out, well that 3 is not all of a sudden a whole number, even though it's still a decimal. So it's like going straight from that decimal tenths, going straight down. It's 3 groups of 3 tenths, right? And
Right.
so just trying to keeping the knowledge, keeping the whole numbers together, keeping the decimals together.
And even naming those places is backwards.
Right.
Moving that way.
Right. So I think the
which
chart would
can
be
also-
good, just kind of keeping it all lined up.
Okay, I like that. What are you visualizing the exit ticket looking like? I know you said you wanted to make sure that they could verbally explain it to you. So would that component be you just
I could, if they were kind of doing some kind of independent work, even if I was to go around and just kind of asking them, stop, tell me exactly what you're doing.
okay?
And if they can, I would love for them to be able to say, well, I'm taking this number, it's 3 groups of this, so I'm putting it here. Just if they can verbalize what they're doing and the process, that would be great. I would
Okay.
consider if they were able to do that independently, we were on a good track with that.
Okay.
It's not really an exit ticket, but I think that's a way that I can kind of just assess them as I'm going
Assess
around.
maybe assess the verbal part
Uh-huh.
of that
Uh-huh.
as they're going around. Are you visualizing anything else that they might do like independently at the end of the time that you would collect to kind of say, ooh, can they do it? Maybe in both forms, like
Yeah,
vice
I think
versa.
just giving them a simple number. Hey, just show me on this number. Can you break it apart into this and this, and just kind of allowing them to focus just on one number, break it apart properly. We would be good.
Okay. And so that would be considered like your exemplar. Are you thinking like just one number or 2 numbers? How many do you think would be an accurate picture to say they've got it, they don't have it?
Well, it is. I feel like. I think it's almost like because it's 2 part. They have to do if they don't do the expanded form right, then they're not going to do the expanded notation right.
Correct.
So it's kind of 2 parts. So I think giving them one number and can they do this part right and do this part right? It's kind of almost like 2 numbers, but it's like 2
It
problems.
also give
kind
you
of.
feedback too, because if they don't get the expanded form right, okay,
Right.
we've got to go all the way back to this step.
Right. So it's kind of like I need to assess expanded form first. Do they have just the good place value knowledge, and then can they take
And
it the
put it-
next step and put it in the expanded notation?
Okay.
So I think one would give me a lot of knowledge.
Are you wanting them to use the strategies you're teaching in the lesson? Like, are you wanting them, having them like model that, putting the boxes around, on that exit ticket or in their independent practice? Are you kind of really wanting them to
I would
model that too?
If they can use the strategies that I'm
Yeah.
modeling, I think they gotta do something different than what they've been doing before. So I want them to. I would like that. I guess yes. That would be an expectation that I would say
Okay.
I need to see you using these strategies.
How soon are you wanting to reteach this?
Pretty soon. I would maybe say the next day or so.
Okay. Okay, so walk me through kind of how you're visualizing the lesson will go when I could come in tomorrow. So how do you visualize the lesson going?
Well, kind of modeling how she did it on the video. I mean, she used her anchor chart. She had a visual, so I would do the same thing. I would first start with an anchor chart, taking a number, using those same words, kind of just modeling expanded form. We can model expanded notation. We'll do the place value chart. We'll draw the chart with that number so that we're just kind of keeping everything organized. We'll model it, and then let them, do, a couple problems independently. I'd love to walk around, talk with them, and seeing their, and just them modeling exactly how we did it on the anchor chart.
So kind of like a whole group practice.
I think so.
Okay. What do you think would happen or what will you do if maybe they're still not getting it? You taught them this new strategy, some new verbiage, and you're kind of walking around as they're practicing. If they're still not getting it, what might be your thinking? What might you do then?
I would make sure first that they were using that place value chart.
Okay.
And if they aren't using that, or ask them why they're not using that, and if they're confused by something, I'm gonna assume that maybe it's a problem with just the number sense of being able to understand what those numbers are and what their values are and what place they're in. So I think I will kind of revisit just the place value concept.
Okay, maybe scaffold back.
Yeah, we'll go back, and then not breaking apart the numbers, but just what are these numbers? What are the different places that they're in? And if that's still confusing them, I think that's kind of where I would want to start, is going back to the value of the numbers and see what information that gets us. Because if they're confusing themselves about, just what the different tens place and hundreds place and what that actually looks like, then there's no reason.
They've got some numbers.
They've got something, some kind of misconception.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, and then after you do kind of like the whole group practice, so we're doing the anchor chart, the teaching, with the new verbiage in the chart. We'll have some whole group practice. You said you wanted to kind of walk around, see if they can
Talk with them a little bit and see what
verbally explain the process. You can kind of check for that understanding. And then after they do the whole group practice, then what would be your next step?
I would probably I want to reassess them a little bit differently.
Okay.
I think that sometimes it wasn't fair with our assessment because we had never practiced typing in the numbers with the keyboard. And so I feel like, I don't know if even though we hand graded, I looked at each question. They did have some wrong numbers and that kind of stuff, but I don't want to throw them for a loop and just redo the same assessment, the same kind of questioning. So I would do a different kind of, if we practicing paper pencil, I would want to assess them a paper pencil. I wouldn't want to throw an iPad or a.
Do you think the way, so like you're saying, like the digital assessment wasn't necessarily fair because it really wasn't how you practiced
it was them typing it in, and so which I do want them creating it, because I do think that it needs to be some hands-on. They need to be making it themselves.
Sure.
But a little bit of that. If we practice that in the classroom, I want them to practice writing it out and breaking up the number apart.
Yeah.
So I would just kind of assess in the same way that they were practicing.
So maybe reassess paper pencil.
Yeah. Even on, like, thinking back to STAR testing, they're not having to recreate it with all the decimals and like the parentheses and things like
they're
that.
not really typing it in.
They're not having to type
So
it.
it's not really the same format that they're going to see.
So I feel like it's I don't want to, confuse them by having to do something that they're not comfortable or proficient in.
And it could give us some feedback too,
And whether it's paper pencil or them just being able to kind of like, okay, that is the right, kind of just being able to match up, kind of like what the Boom did, and they were pretty successful in that.
well, and digitally they can't make the place value chart. Okay, so I think we'll plan for tomorrow. So
Okay.
I will come in tomorrow for the reteaching
Fun.
of the assessment, and maybe we can meet during your planning time tomorrow to kind of go over it.
So we'll reteach the lesson. We'll do our kind of an exit ticket, see if they got it.
Yeah.
And then
Then
I
kinda go over it.
won't assess them quite yet, but we'll assess after our visit, or
Well, I think maybe reteach, maybe do like an exit ticket, and then maybe we can kind of look at them together.
Okay.
During the planning time, just kind of see how they did, see if
Okay.
maybe new strategy kind of worked.
Sounds good, thank you.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Awesome.
All right, thanks.